Today we are going to continue our discussion the on the categorical syllogisms. Let's go now to the laws governing the categorical argument. Okay? Because the laws governing the categorical argument, this will be the basis for saying whether the argument is valid or invalid. So if the syllogism agrees with all these rules or laws, then the syllogism is a valid argument. But if the syllogism violates any of these laws or rules, then the argument is invalid. Meaning by invalid, it is an inconsistent argument. So let us take the first one. These are the first general law. It's called dictum de omni. Okay, dictum de omni. Dictum de omni. Whatever is affirmed universally in a formal manner of a logical whole or class should also be affirmed of its logical parts. This dictum de omni is similar to the rule on subalternation about whatever is true to the universal is also true to the or to its particular. So that's similar. So here, if all x are y and some z are x, then some z are y. Okay. Let me show that in a diagram, in a Venn diagram. I will just erase my there. I hope you can see. I don't know if the whiteboard will still be clear with this. I hope you can. So we say all x are y. How do we draw this? All x are y. All x are y. There are two circles. You can see that, two circles. Which circle is the x?
The smaller one.
The smaller one. Good. So this one will be the y. All x are y. Right? Y is the predicate. So predicate is particular, is one. Now some z are x. So I will draw a circle here. This will be the z. Okay? Rx, this one. Therefore, some z are y. So this is the conclusion. This part is the conclusion. So that's dictum de omni. Okay? Now let's go to the next. Dictum de nullio. The rule, dictum de nullio means the rule of none. Nullio, null means nothing, none. Okay? Whatever is denied universally in a formal manner of a logical whole or class should also be denied of its logical parts. So if you say all x are not y, so here all x, these are x, these are the y's, and some z are x, z here, these are the z. Okay, some z are x. Therefore, some z, this one, are not y. Okay, so that's dictum de nullio. Next, if two concepts agree with the same third concept, then they also agree with each other. So if A agrees with C and B also agrees with A, what would be the conclusion? Anyone? What's the conclusion?
So B is C.
Yes, B is C. There. Okay. Next, if one concept agrees with a third term, meaning third concept, and the other disagrees with the same third term, then they disagree with each other. So basic rule. If A is B and C is not A, what will be the conclusion?
C is
C is,
not
C is not B.
yes, correct. C is not B. Okay, C is not B. Okay, so these are logical rules. Okay, this is this is not supposed to be foreign to our mind, to our, to our intellect, because these are logical rules. But of course, sometimes the first time you hear it, it may be quite difficult to understand. But when you think about, yeah, that's it. That's correct. Okay. So next, if two terms disagree with the same third term, then nothing can be concluded or nothing can follow. If they both disagree, let's say A is not B and C is not A, meaning they are not connected at all. They are not. There's no relationship at all. So in a diagram, you can say A is not B, okay, and C is not also A. So there's no. Look at this. There is a connection, but here no connection at all. So nothing can be said about them, meaning there will be no conclusion. Okay, clear, clear, class.
yes.
Good. So I will erase this now. Let's go to the 8 rules of the categorical syllogism. So those are the general rules. These are now the 8 rules of the category. So we're talking of the categorical syllogism here. So the first rule is there must only be 3 terms in the syllogism. Okay, just 3 terms. These are the major term, the minor term, and what's the third one? What's the third one?
Middle.
The
Middle
middle
term.
term. So there must be only 3 terms. All right, major, minor, and middle term. Now, if you don't follow this, if you have 4 terms, then that means we have a 4-term construction. And this is an example you see on the screen, your 4-term construction. How do you detect this? Again, you draw a pattern like this. Okay, so again, you draw the line S, P. What is the S in this example? That's the S.
Local
Look,
officials.
Local officials, correct. And that is here, right? And then the P is
Politicians.
politicians, and that is the
Major premise.
in the major premise, and it's in the what?
subject.
In the
Subject.
subject. Okay. And then the remaining terms are influential individuals and elected by the people. So there is no common term, right? Because there are 4 terms in the premises. So you have identified politicians as the major term, local officials as the minor term, and then there are still 2 remaining terms, influential individuals and elected by the people. So you have a 4-term construction. Okay, so in a 4-term construction, you cannot connect the two because they don't share a common term. That's the reason why there must only be 3 terms, so that there's a common term between the 2 terms, meaning a common term between the major and the minor terms. Okay? Now, another violation or fallacy. By the way, fallacy means fallacy. Fallacy means error. Okay? It's an error in argumentation. Okay? Okay, it's an error in argumentation, a fallacy. Parang ano siya, parang it's not falsity, Okay? It's not falsity. Falsity kasi, falsehood or falsity is the opposite of truth. Okay? Okay. So, iba yung error. Nagkamali ka, no? Mali. Hindi ibig sabihin nagsinungaling ka. There's a difference between nagkamali, committed an error, and you lied. Okay? So, there's a difference between committing error and lying. Okay? Of course, some people, they lie about their errors. That's a different story. Okay, so another error, another fallacy is the fallacy of equivocation. Okay? What is a fallacy of equivocation? Let me explain first equivocation. Remember the equivocal term, right? What is an equivocal term? It's a term that expresses two different meanings. So even if you use only one term, but the term that you use, normally it's the middle term, expresses two meanings. So when you count the concepts, there are actually four concepts because one term expresses two different meanings. Like for example, this one, see on the screen. What is natural is good. To make mistake is natural. Therefore, to make mistakes is good. Oh, obviously there's an error there. But how do you detect the error? Again, you can do it this way. Make mistakes is good. So good is P, and you write P here. Make mistakes here. Where's that? S is, and the middle term is natural. So if you count, there appears to be just three terms, right? But if you check on the meaning of the natural in the first, to make, okay, what is natural is good. And to make mistakes is natural. Natural in the first premise is different from natural in the second premise, right? Natural in the first premise, what is natural is good. What follows nature is good. That's the meaning of natural in the first. In the second, to make mistakes natural. Natural means what? It's normal. Okay? It's normal to make mistakes. But normal is different from what follows nature. Okay? What follows natural in the moral sense and natural in the ordinary sense. These are two different things. Therefore, you commit the fallacy of equivocation. Okay? That's a fallacy of equivocation because you have a term that expresses two different meanings. Oh. This is a very common example of equivocation. Uh, God is love, but love is blind. Therefore, what's the conclusion? God is love, but love is blind. So the conclusion is therefore God is blind. It's obviously there's a mistake there. But the mistake is actually based on the definition of love. Love applied to God and love applied to man. So what is the love that is blind? Well, it's not the love of God. It's the love of man, which is blind. Okay, so that's equivocation. Okay, now let's go to the next rule. No term may have a greater extension in the conclusion than in the premises. Again, what are the terms in the conclusion? What are the two terms in the conclusion? Here, you can see this here. What are the two terms in the conclusion?
Minor and
The
major.
minor and the major. So the rule states that these two terms, the major and the minor, cannot have greater extension. What does it mean to have greater extension? It's like this. So remember, this pertains to the S and the P. So it says, no term may have greater extension in the conclusion than in the premises. So again, this is the line, all right? So below the line, conclusion, above the line, premise, okay? So it cannot have a greater extension. So if it is universal in the conclusion and particular in the premise, that means it has greater extension in the conclusion. But the rule says no term may be this, may have greater extension in the conclusion than in the premise. So this is a fallacy. Why? You cannot argue, we go back to the principle of in the opposition, what is true to some particular may not be true to all. So you cannot go from some, therefore all. Okay? Because under deductive argument, your conclusion must always be necessarily true. Always, all the time. But in this case, it will not give you a necessary true conclusion. Okay? You call this illicit process. Illicit meaning invalid process. So what would be a valid process? Okay? Valid process would be universal in the premise, particular in the conclusion. Because it's not wider, it's not greater, right? Universal, universal. It's not wider, it's not greater. Or P and P. So these are all valid or licit, while this is invalid or illicit process. You understand? Again, you can see this if you draw the pattern. If you don't draw the pattern, it will not be shown. Excuse me. Okay? So there are two fallacies here. Illicit process of the major term and illicit process of the minor term. So this is illicit major. So, okay? So I will erase this now. So let's draw the pattern of this. All boxers are fighters. So again, SP. Okay? Fighters here. I hope you can, let's make this faster. Anyway, you already know this. No, I mean, drawing the schema. Soldiers, and the middle term, boxers, M. M, okay? So all boxers are fighters, universal, affirmative. Take note, that's particular because it's affirmative proposition. Some soldiers, P, are not negative, universal. Therefore, some soldiers are not fighters, P, negative, U. Now, he said illicit process of the major. Look at the major term. What is the major term? The P, right? P. Here and here. So look, particular in the premise, universal in the conclusion. Exactly like this. So this is an illicit major. Illicit process of the major term, or simply illicit major, we shortcut that. No? Illicit process of the major term. What about illicit minor? So it builds like this. So this would be the syllogism. All boxers are fighters. So just illustrate this. SP, boxers, M here, and so P, S, M, that P plus P Now check the major, P, P, so that's correct, right? It's the same as this one. While the S, here, here, this is illicit minor. That's the same as this one. Okay, you follow? I hope you follow. Clear, class? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes po.
What about the rest? Sisters, can you follow, sisters?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now let's move on to the third rule. Okay, so the middle term must not appear in the conclusion because, of course, the middle term should be in the premises, right? No business being in the last proposition. So here, we call this misplaced middle term. Look at this example. All philosophers are wise. Say, I, Saint Thomas is a philosopher. Therefore, Saint Thomas is a wise philosopher. While the conclusion is true, because of course Saint Thomas is a wise philosopher. That's true. However, the process is invalid because the middle term, which is philosopher, should not be there anymore in the conclusion. It should just be Saint Thomas. Therefore, Saint Thomas is wise. The philosopher there need not be no need not appear in the conclusion. Okay. Now let's go to the fourth one. The middle term must be taken as a universal in the premises at least once. Now, why? It means must be taken as a universal at least once. Meaning, and we're talking of the M, right? Talking of the middle term. So the middle term must always be in the above the line. It must be taken as a universal at least once. Meaning it cannot be particular twice. It cannot be P and P. You call this undistributed middle term. To distribute means to make it universal. Because when you make it universal, then it will include at least one of the other terms. Okay, it will overlap at least one of the middle terms. Okay, if you do this, so this is wrong. Okay, this is wrong. What is correct should be both M are U, so that's valid. One M is U, MP or MU, or MU, MP. So these are all valid, okay, valid or licit. This one is the invalid because both are particular middle terms. Let's have an example. Okay, so again, you have to master writing the schema. S, P. So congressman, that's the P. Where would I write the P in the major premise? Subject or predicate?
Subject.
In the subject. Good. What about the S? Where would I write the S? Subject or predicate side?
Subject.
Subject.
Subject. Correct. So therefore, the two remaining terms, they're middle terms. Okay. Now all. So you can see the premise, all the propositions, all. So they're all universal. Are all affirmative. So you can do it this way to make make it faster. Then since all of them are affirmative, automatic, this side will be
Particular.
particular. Okay? Now, you can start checking. So you check this, universal, universal, no problem. That's okay, right? This is particular, universal, no problem also. Okay, but this is the error. Both are particular. Okay, so this is an undistributed middle term. Now, it's possible that one syllogism may have two or three violations or fallacies. Okay, but it will only, just one fallacy will make the entire argument already fallacious, meaning invalid. Okay, just one fallacy, it will make the whole thing invalid. Okay, that's why it's very difficult to come up with a really good valid argument, because you have to avoid all these errors or these fallacies. Okay, now let's go to the last four. The last four are easy to understand because these are all related to the other rules that we have already discussed. So first, number 5, if both premises are affirmative, the conclusion must be affirmative. It's the same as general rule number 3. If both terms agree with the same third term, then they agree with each other. So rule number 5, it's very simple. Okay, so both premises are affirmative, 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 whatever the terms may be there. Okay, if both are affirmative, the conclusion must be affirmative. If it happens to be like this, affirmative, affirmative, conclusion negative, this is a fallacy. So what I'm encircling, remember, these are all errors, right? Fallacy of a negative conclusion. Okay, so here the example on the screen. Okay, so both propositions are affirmative. Businessmen, bankers are businessmen, bankers are accountants, and then the conclusion is negative. Some accountants are not businessmen. So obviously, that is a fallacy of a negative conclusion. Okay, so again, you can see this by writing the correct schema. Okay, now number 6, no conclusion can be drawn from two negative premises. This is actually similar to rule number 5, the general law number 5. That would be the fallacy of two negative premises. So at least one premise must be affirmative. Okay, one premise must be affirmative. It cannot be too negative here because there will be zero conclusion. Okay, zero conclusion. Like for example here, no pagan believe in Christ, no Christian is a pagan, so what can you conclude? No, there's no conclusion there. Okay, so one premise must be affirmative. Okay, or it could be like this: affirmative first, the negative. Okay, so that should be the right combination of premises. Number 7, no valid conclusion can be derived from two particular premises. So it's like this. Again, okay, so long line would be the demarcation between premise and conclusion. We're looking at here. This is the valid combination of premises. One must be universal. Okay, it could be like this, but it could be universal, particular. We are talking of the subject, okay, not the predicate. Okay, so these are invalid. These are valid. Okay, what I'm circling are all the invalid. Okay, so if it's like this, P, okay, this is invalid because these are two particular premises or double particular premises. Example here. You can easily see this, especially if you have the quantifiers, some government officials, some individuals. Obviously, you have two particular premises there. Okay, so even just by looking at it, you will know that that is an invalid argument because the two premises are particular. You don't have to, but if you want to find out the other errors, can continue, but that is obviously an invalid argument because both premises are particular. Okay? And then the last one, the conclusion always follows the weaker side. Meaning, if one, so I will just put a number here so that you can easily identify. This is number 5, okay? This is number 6, this is number 7, and this is number 8, okay? Conclusion follows the weak side. It means, if one premise is negative and the other one is affirmative, the conclusion must be negative. It cannot be like this. Negative, affirmative, affirmative. This is wrong. If one premise is universal, the other one is particular. So I'm writing it this way so that you will know that this is the subject side. The conclusion must be P, weaker side. It cannot be U, P, and then U. This is wrong. So here are some examples of this. That one. You see, no soldier is a coward. Some criminals are cowards. All criminals. So obviously, look at the example. There is some, one premise is particular, but the conclusion is universal. So that is invalid. Every income earner must pay taxes. Some employees do not pay taxes. Negative. Every employee pays tax. Affirmative. So affirmative, negative, affirmative, that is a fallacy. Stronger conclusion. Let us try. Oh wait, before we do this exercise, the two exercises that we done, I did not erase. Let's check if this is valid. So how do we check if this is valid? Again, we're going to start with the conclusion. Okay. So SP, that's correct. U, that's correct also. MP, MU, that's correct also. So far, no error. One negative, conclusion negative. No problem. One affirmative, no double negative, right? One P, particular. So this is a valid argument. This does not commit any fallacy. What about this? Okay. What about this one? Here. So P. Now, class. Just to shorten your your analysis. Once you see that the conclusion is an I statement, I proposition. It's an I proposition. SP plus PP. Right? There's no illicit process. Okay? No illicit process. Now, here, look at the middle term. If you see one middle term universal, here, there's no undistributed middle. Two affirmative, okay. Universal, particular, that's okay. Because what is wrong is, if there's one particular here, in the conclusion is universal, that's the one that is wrong. So these two are valid, okay? They are valid arguments. All right, now let's try these examples here you find on your screen. Now let's try the first one. Then after this, you do the others. Number 1 is P. Celebrities. Okay. S P M M. And so what I'm doing is I'm just looking at the terms, and then I'm looking at the quantity of the proposition, see if they are all universal or what are the particular propositions. So every sum, every sum, and then sum. So that means this is U, this is P, and this is P. So that's one way of, making this fast. And then I check if they are all affirmative or which one is a negative proposition. It's looks all of them are affirmative. So I just write affirmative, affirmative. And since not all are affirmative, then I just go P and P. You follow, class? You follow?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
All right. Now, here, as I said, if you have an I conclusion, SP plus PP, there's no illicit process, right? So you don't worry about this. The next thing that you check would be the middle term,
Mhm.
okay? And the middle term here, both are particular. So you already spot one error, one fallacy. This is undistributed
The
middle term, okay? That's undistributed middle term. So that's fast, right? I'm showing you some techniques here, okay? Okay. If you want, you can continue, but this is safe because affirmative, affirmative. That's if you follow the illustration I wrote, the all the correct correct schema. No, you can just double check here, then you know whether that's good or not. Let's go to the next. So number two, again, SP, and then what is the S? Foods, foods that are full of nutrients. Okay, so this there is here and necessary to maintain health P. And then your middle term healthy foods M M. Okay, so this is the more complicated, more difficult thing to do is identifying the terms. Okay, but once you're through with that, it's already. Then all. So that means universal, universal, universal. And then all are affirmative. Okay, so plus, plus, plus. And since these are all affirmative, just write P and P.
PP.
And then check, oops, universal here, it must be universal there, otherwise it's wrong. PU, that is invalid. So automatic, this is an illicit
Minor term.
minor term. See how easy it is? If you have done this correctly. Let's take the third one, and then there's another set of uh, fallacies there or syllogisms there that you will do on your own. Okay, so let's take number three again. Again, it's like this: SP, and then I just identify the term. Kind educators, it's here, and then like by their students, it's here, and therefore prudent professors. And 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 then all, some, all. Uy, meron na kagad mali doon. All, some, all. Even if you don't finish this, obviously there's already something wrong there. What do you think is the fallacy?
weaker
Weaker,
weaker side.
yeah, weaker side. But yeah, that's rule number 8, correct? That's a stronger conclusion. Okay, you did not take the weaker side, meaning the fallacy is a stronger conclusion because one of the premises is P, and then your conclusion is universal. So even if you don't continue, you already know that's an invalid argument. But let's just continue to find out What are the other errors? So just these are all affirmative. So affirmative, 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 P, P, P. So there you go. So this one is already wrong. What's the other fallacy?
Illicit of minor.
Yes, correct. Illicit minor. Here, this one. That is illicit minor. So this is now the figures and the moods. Figures and moods are patterns of the syllogism. These are patterns. So you can see here the position of the middle term. You can see the combination of propositions, whether affirmative, negative, I, A, E, I, and O. So these are different combinations of the propositions. So the figure is the position of the middle term. It's a pattern based on the position of the middle term, whether it is the subject of the major premise or the predicate of the major premise, or it is the subject or predicate of the minor premise. If you can see, as you can see, the placing of the minor and major terms in the conclusion, the S and the P, it doesn't change. It's always SP. But in the premises, the M and the P, S and M may interchange places. So that's the figure, the placement of the middle term. Figure number one, it's like this: subject, predicate. Figure number two, both middle term are predicate. Figure number three, both are subjects. And figure number four, predicate, subject. So these are the four figures. Okay. Now, uh, so here, this is figure. Sorry. Okay, these are the four figures. The modes would be the combination of propositions that comprise the syllogism. Like for example here, no machine is thinking, a thinking being, that's an E. Every computer is a machine. This is A. No computer is a thinking being, E. So this is EAE. This is the mood combination of the different propositions. Okay, so that's okay. Now, for every figure, there is a corresponding valid moods. I will not discuss anymore the rules, but just to show you what are the valid moods for every figure. Okay, so these are the valid combinations. Okay, there's a name there, but well, this is important for those people who are taking logic. But since this is not basically a logic class, you don't have to memorize the names. I'm just showing you that there's one way of determining if a syllogism is valid. Okay, so I will just show you all the figures in the moods. Okay, this is figure 2. These are the valid moods. Okay, this one, these are the valid moods. The 4, this one. Of course, there's a name of the valid moods, Sara Camestres, but that's not important to you. Okay, and then figure 3. Okay, so these are the valid moods. So this is the figure. These are the valid moods in figure number 3. There are 6. And figure 4, those are the names. Okay, predicate, subject, and these are the valid moods. There. Okay, so and those are the names. How do you apply this? Okay, when you are given a syllogism, for example, like this. Okay, let's do this in the board. Just very quickly. Okay, I have 10 minutes. So here you have that's the given syllogism. Luxury cars. So let's do this fast. S, P. Luxury cars, the middle term. So M, obviously this P and S. Okay, and then universal affirmative. both proposition sum, so P, P, affirmative, affirmative. Okay, so you have this, you have this, schema. Now, of course, you want to check whether this is valid or invalid, right? So you can do this by going through the rules one by one, or you can do it this way. You identify the figure. Remember the figure. This is figure 1, meaning this is M. This is figure 2, meaning it's the on the predicate side. This is figure 3. Okay, so I put it this way. So you can see, you can have a reference. So predicate, subject, and then M, M. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. Look at this. What figure is this?
Figure 3.
3. Okay, 3. This is 3. And then what proposition is this? It's already there. No? A. This is I. I. So now you have to check. Is there I in figure 3? Is this one of the valid modes? So you go back to figure 3. Let's go back to figure 3. There. And check if there is AII. There is here. AII. If this mode is in figure 3, that means this is a valid argument. You don't have to go to check this one by one against the rules. You understand? This is another way of checking if the argument is a valid argument. Now, if it happens that you get the figure, but the mode is not one of the valid rules under this figure, then that means there's something wrong with this syllogism. Then that's the time you have to check what is the fallacy. Then you can check it one by one against the rule. Okay? But under this, if it's a valid mode under this figure, then you're done. You know that that argument is already a valid argument. Okay? All right, let's take this one, number 1. This is the last example. So let's take number 1 here. You draw the pattern SP. Then legislators, I hope you can follow. I hope you can do it this fast now. Public servants. So SP. Okay. So all, and some. All, some. And then all affirmative. Okay. What figure is this?
4. Figure 4.
4. Figure 4. Okay. So now universal affirmative, actually it's easy. Because once you have written this correctly, all you have to do is look at this. It's universal affirmative. Hey. It's universal affirmative. Hey. It's particular affirmative. I. Now check. A figure 4. 4. Is there AII figure 4? Is there?
No.
There. That's AI. Sorry, AAI. Right? You see that? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that means figure 4, AAI, this is valid. So that's another way of checking if the syllogism is a valid syllogism. So there are two ways by which you can check if an argument, a syllogism like this, is valid or invalid. First, you can check by way of uh, checking it against the rule, or you can do it by determining the figure and the mood. Okay, but the figure and the mood will only be is applicable if the argument is valid. It will not tell you what is the error or the fallacy. That's why you still have, so if it is an invalid argument, you still have to go through the rules in order to find out, to determine what is the error. But if it's already a valid argument, of course, no need to go through the rules, because obviously there are no rules violated because the argument is a valid argument. So that's the meaning of valid argument, that it follows the logical principles or the logical rules.